Hey everybody, KC here. So one of my favorite thriller writers is Mark Greaney, and he's out with his 12th Gray Man book. It's called Burner, and this is terrific. This is a can't put it down kind of thriller, and I am thrilled to tell you that for the third time, Mark Greaney is back on Morning Newsbeat. I've had him on twice before to talk about the Gray Man books, and I really wanted to talk to him about this because this one is set against the backdrop of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And he was writing this a year ago, and the war is like a year old. And so he had to do a certain amount of prognosticating. It's amazing how much he got right. It's a really good book. And he lets us in on a little bit on his author's secrets, and I just want to share it with you. So I hope you enjoy my conversation today with author Mark Greaney. Mark Greaney, welcome back to Morning Newsbeat.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Oh, listen, I've really enjoyed these conversations. I've really been looking forward to this one. The new book is Burner. Hold it up right here. Now on sale, wherever you get your books. So the thing that really grabbed me about this book is it's so pegged to what's going on in Ukraine. Yeah. And that just from the moment I read it, I said, I can't wait to talk to him about it. So talk to me a little bit about when you sort of made the decision to do this, because you had to be writing this. I mean, we're about a year in right now into the Ukraine conflict. Yeah. Did you see it coming before other people? I mean, how did that go? How did it come about that you decided to make this a little bit more pegged to real world events, I think, than some of the previous books?
Well, I definitely think I got a lot of things right, but I definitely have to admit I did not see that coming. Like a week before Russia invaded, I was kind of scratching my head saying, I think this is brinksmanship. I think they're just trying to they're just trying to leverage their power. So I was wrong, way wrong about that. But I was already working on a book about Russian intelligence funneling money through Switzerland to influence important people in the West. And so I had that much. And once the war started, I became really passionate follower of what was going on and every aspect of it. This book, not one page of it takes place in Ukraine. Not one page of it is directly involving the war. There's no tanks or anything like that. It involves Russian intelligence in Europe and in the US and even in the Caribbean. And that all developed as the war was going on. It's tough last spring and summer to try and prognosticate where we were going to be February of next year when the book comes out, as far as where the Russian troops would be, where the West would be as far as support or lack of support for Ukraine. And I got a lot of the stuff right. There's really nothing in there that couldn't still happen. I've been pleasantly surprised with U.S. support for the Ukrainians. That's a really good thing. It's a little bit more dire in the book, but there you do hear those voices in the real world of people that think we're giving them too much support.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff revolves around the idea that at some point the U.S. is just going to want to broker, even if it's not good for Ukraine, to broker some kind of a resolution to it because it's just not good for the world economy. And that just seemed, I'm reading that, I'm going, these conversations have to be taking place right now.
Yeah, they are taking place, and we've even seen some of the intelligence operations recently. An FBI, the head of the counterintelligence office in New York was indicted for working with the Russians, and a Russian agent for the GRU was at the International Criminal Court, and a German guy in German intelligence was arrested for espionage with the Russians. So these things are actually going on that are in the book.
Do you read that stuff and get a little thrill because, I got that one right?
Yeah, I feel like I should say no, but yes, I do. I get a big thrill. I mean, you don't want bad things to happen, but at the same time, when you sort of know they are happening, to one degree or another, to actually see the evidence of it is fulfilling. Yeah.
Well, you would appear from having read all the books to have some level of cynicism about international affairs. And while it's never good when your cynicism is when cynicism is rewarded because you're right, at the end of the day, at least you were right.
Yeah, I am pretty cynical about a lot of things. In the 90s, it was the United Nations, and people thought they were going to save the world. And I was just rolling my eyes. And I was like, if it's not water bottles and blankets, they historically just screw things up, make things worse. And now it's obviously regime change, that whole 20-year experience, that didn't look like it was ever going to work to me. Arab Spring, things like that. And so I hate to be like one of the grumpy old men on the Muppet Show going, looking at politics, but at the
Waldorf.
same, yeah, Stadler and Waldorf, and
Yeah.
yeah. So but yeah, I'm hopeful about some things, and I'm as I said, I'm very, very happy about how the West has supported Ukraine to date.
Have you been surprised? We're talking less about the book here, but have you been surprised to the degree to which Ukraine has stepped up in terms of being able to I mean, for a year essentially hold off? A lot of people thought it would be over in 2 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been surprised. Monday morning quarterbacking, I can look back and say, well, they've been fighting since 2014, so to one degree or another, and also they have been planning for this conflict and no other conflict for the last 30 years, I guess, because of or at least 20 years. As long as Putin's been in power, he's been saying that Ukraine wasn't a real country and he would take it back. So, but no, I think everybody has surprised by how poorly the Russians have done and how well the Ukrainians have done, and it's a great thing.
Is there a reason that Putin's name is not used in the book? I mean, it seems like I was curious because it's
Yeah,
still pegged to real events, and yet names like that. I mean, you never name you're also careful about U.S. on the U.S. side as well. But I was
yeah.
surprised that Putin's name does not specifically get used.
Yeah, I've never really done that. Even I wrote a book about Syria, and I didn't have the guy's name wasn't Assad. It was like Azam, but he was,
Right.
he was an ophthalmologist who became the leader of the country.
Right.
It was virtually the exact same thing. And I think at one point my publisher told me that was the better way to go, and I'm like, I don't feel like Assad is going to sue me in court in Tennessee where I live, but yeah, I've always just sort of made little changes because I don't want the character to be exactly the same. I want the freedom to, change aspects of the character and take things from reality, and then at some point there's a jumping off point where the character is fictional.
Talk a little bit about the research process. I know when we talked probably the first time, it was the middle of COVID. And I think you were saying you were disappointed because you weren't able to go out and do the kind of physical
Yeah,
research that you like to do. Has
yeah.
that changed? Are you getting back out there to do your research?
Yeah, for this book, I did. I went to several countries and I got COVID. In 2.5 years, I didn't have COVID, and I went to Switzerland and Italy to do research for this book. And my wife and I both came home uh, sick with COVID, but small price to pay. We
Yeah.
shook it off. But I went to St. Lucia in the Caribbean, which is one of the locations in the book. I went up to New York City.
Tough
Uh,
duty. Tough duty,
yeah,
Lucia, right?
it's funny. Some years you go to certain places in the developing world and you're like, okay, this is the hard work. And then other years, you're on a beach in St. Lucia going scuba diving to do research, and you're going like, okay, this is a good year. The book I'm writing now, part of it takes place in Cuba. I've never been to Cuba. I've always wanted to go, but I really don't know what I'll experience. But this time next year, I'll know.
But so you are going to go to Cuba.
Yes.
So where else did you go in researching the book?
So I went to St. Lucia, New York, Milan, Zurich, and Geneva. And there's a 80-page train sequence in this book. It's 15% of the novel. I went and looked afterwards because I knew it was the biggest action scene I've ever written. And it was 80 pages. And I'd written the entire book, turned it in, and then realized, okay, this could be better. I have to go to Europe and I have to get on this train and do all the research. And I did that, and it really did help the story.
So you went back in and then adjusted the
Yeah.
scene based on the thing. So it's a
My
real
second
train.
draft.
It's a
Yeah.
real train from here to there.
Yeah, yeah. I have everything sort of exactly the way that it is on the train. I took it in the afternoon, and in the book it's at night, but otherwise it was the same experience. Nobody got killed on my 4-hour journey from Milan to Geneva, as far as I know. And that's different than the book.
Yeah. Well, and it is a great sequence. I have to say,
Thank you.
it was.
Thank you.
I mean, reading it, and it's a part of the book where, without giving anything away, there's this sense of existential dread that I thought was some of the
Yeah.
best your writing that I've seen. I couldn't put it down, but it
Thank
also
you.
kind of reminded me of one of those long Martin Scorsese tracking shots, right? It just goes
Yeah.
up and you just keep
Yeah.
following it, and that's how, in a literary sense, that's how that whole sequence played out for me as a reader.
Yeah, and really, I didn't plan on making my biggest action scene ever, but as I was building the scene up, there's basically four different parties in conflict with each other, all on this one big long train, high speed train. And as I was building it, there was just lots of points of tension between who sees who when, and who's, what different people's objectives are, and it just got bigger and bigger. The setup got bigger and bigger. So then I was like, well, I have to pay this off with like an epic scene. And as I said, it turned into 15% of the novel, but a lot goes on there. It's not just 15. It's not 15% of the novel when people are just shooting back and forth down a corridor. There's a lot of different moving
Yeah.
parts.
Yeah. Do you set that up for yourself as, do you think of it in terms as being a writing, I mean, you didn't know it was 80 pages till you went back and looked, but did you
Mhm.
set that up for yourself in terms of as a writing challenge in addition to a narrative challenge, if you know what I mean?
Well, it just yeah, at this point in my career, everything's a writing challenge because you want to do things you haven't done before. And so I always approach things from like, okay, I've got a good guy and a bad guy. They're going to have some sort of a conflict. I've written 23 novels, 12 gray man, but 23 novels. It's like I can't do something I've done before. So everything feels like when you get to it, it's some sort of a puzzle, where in the old days it was hard, but it was easier because just whatever you thought up, you could work into a story. And now you can't think the first 23 things you think up, you can't use because
Right.
you've used them before. So there's challenges all around when you write these.
Yeah. Now, since we've last talked, the Gray Man movie came out. As a writer, do you find yourself, do you do you consciously avoid either responding to or referencing things in the movie? Do you find yourself? I know some writers who will go out of their way to distance themselves from the movie. How do you sort of think about that?
I think I'm more like that. I'm not distance myself, that I like the movie a lot, and the movie obviously is fantastic for me and for putting eyeballs in my books, which is kind of my goal. But I don't want there's differences in the book and the movie, and the books will remain the books. And there's characters in the Gray Man film who are no longer, who I've killed off, and other characters who are alive, and none of that's going to change, or none of that's going to be affected by what's on screen. They're just two different mediums, and hopefully people enjoy them both. I like the fact that they're different because people can still read my book and have a experience. You don't know what's going to happen if you pick up the Gray Man book, even if you've seen the movie.
Yeah, there is a sense at the end of the book. I'm not sure reset is exactly the right word, but you are clearly you're doing different things. You're moving the characters
Yeah,
around in different ways
yeah.
that will, it seems to me, it sort of sets up whatever, at least in some ways, sets up the next book.
I like
Again,
how you very cleverly put that without giving anything away. That was well done. Yes, and I hasten to add that all my books are standalone. You don't have to read the other books, but if you do read the entire series, there's kind of sagas that will carry over from one book to the next. Like longer plot or character arcs, and every now and then I'll wrap one of those up. It was my fifth Gray Man book before you found out why the CIA was trying to kill
right.
him, and that got cleared up, and then a new saga began, a new saga. And so this is sort of the end of one chapter of one part of the story, and something new's coming after.
Yeah, you just made me think. So it was the fifth book before we find out why the CIA wanted to kill him. Did you know? Did you know when you started to put pen to paper or started to type, or did you have to figure out by the fifth book? Did you say, okay, I got to go back and I got to address this and figure it out?
Yes, I knew that I had to wrap that up because you couldn't just use that as a device. I
Right.
think I had it figured out by like the beginning of the fourth book, like where we were going to go. The
Right.
fourth book and the fifth book are sort of interconnected in some
Yeah.
ways. And but yeah, no, book two, book three, I knew the CIA was, and when I wrote book one, I didn't know it was going to be a series. I didn't even know it was going to be published. So there was no backstory as to why the CIA was after him. He just didn't know, and that was just like a fun little plot device that, you know, these people that he loves and works for are trying to kill him, and he has no idea why. And I'm like, you know, once they asked me to turn into the series, I'm like, I guess someday I'm gonna have to figure that out. And I did figure it out before I wrote it, but not too far before I wrote it.
So how far ahead do you plan as a writer in terms of are you just thinking one book ahead, or do you at this point say, okay, I know where I want it. This is the 12th book. I know where I want to end up on book 15.
Yeah, I wish I was that writer. Clancy was like, I've had conversations with Tom Clancy about that, and he really did have things mapped out ahead of his, in his, at least in his early books. And I do not. You know, I have a general sense that I want to do a book about this, and I want to, you know, go back in time and show this aspect of what the Gray Man was going through at this time. So I have like sort of big macro plot ideas, but I really don't have, you know, story arcs or anything like that. It's book by book. And you say, is it, you know, before you start the book? It's like, well, it's kind of during. Yeah, I'm writing the book as I'm figuring these things out.
Yeah. Are you you know, it's funny. I'm now having read all the books. I'm trying to think to myself, are you aging him in real time?
No, I made
Okay.
a I didn't, again, the first book, I didn't know it was going to turn into anything. So I give his birth date, I give his age, I give all these things, and you kind of regret that later. And I've had a few like very persnickety fans that are like, that doesn't make sense because you said 12 years ago this, and but 12 years ago was that. And I'm like, yeah, buddy, you do 12 of these books, you get this theory going. Now I will say Daniel Silva, who's one of my absolute favorite
Right.
thriller authors, he ages his character in real time. I think Stephen Hunter does in real time.
Well,
And
Michael Connolly's doing the same
yeah,
thing, right? And
absolutely.
suddenly
Yeah,
Bosch
yeah,
is like 75 years old, and it's like,
right. And I totally respect that, and it totally works for that narrative. But my stuff is a little more like James Bond, and you know, if I aged him in real time, he would be about 51 now. So you know, some of those trains he jumps off of would probably be a little more impactful on his lower back than than the way I write them.
yeah. Well, this is great. And I am so thrilled that you came back on Morning Newsbeat. I want to hold it up again. It's Burner, the new Gray Man novel. It's terrific. And there's nothing like picking up a book and you get into it and you can't put it down. And it was like,
Right.
you know, and it was great. I can remember sitting by the fireplace and it was like 2 a.m. and the fire went out and I had to consciously say to myself, I really should go to bed or I'm going to have to put on a log on the fire, but I didn't want to. So
That's
it's a
fantastic.
terrific thriller and I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Hey,
Great to see
listen,
you
thanks
again.
for doing it. Take care. See you. I'll see you in a year.
Yeah, I'll be back. I'll be back. You'll
Sounds
have me.
good. Take care.
Bye bye.